This is Yahidne village in Ukraine. The locals call this place the Bucha of Chernihiv region because Russian invaders destroyed houses and murdered civilians here as well. But its distinctive trait is that the Russians kept locals in a school cellar for a whole month, in darkness, with the lack of oxygen. As soon as Russians entered the village at the beginning of March, they started threatening people with guns and drove them all to that cellar. Overall, more than 360 people were forcefully kept in those inconvenient conditions. More than 10 people, because of the terrible conditions, died. You are watching Marichka Talk. I am Marichka, Ukrainian Australian, living in Perth, Western Australia. I bring to you original news from Ukraine and translated to English, so now you can be updated with all Ukrainian news from primary sources. Today's topic is sad, devastating. It will be hard to hear the story, but it is a true story. Galina, who lives in the village, says that 2nd of March she saw through the kitchen windows that Russians are entering the village. Tanks, military hardware, armed transporters, all driving into the village, and a huge white circle on the doors, on all military. But they didn't know what it meant. They've never seen those white circles anywhere else. Russians surrounded the village with lots of artillery, tanks, vehicles, everything. Galina got scared and crouched into the house. And then they realized, it's like the Nazis. Those bastards. Russians. Well, yes, Russians. And then early in the morning, at 7 a.m., it was still dark. The Russians told everyone, go to the basement. If you will not, we will take you there. And Russians brought people to the school cellar. The Russians came to every house, every apartment, and forced everyone to go to the cellar. Everyone. Did they explain why you have to go to the basement? No one explained anything. People were taken inside from one door, and other Russians blocked all the other exits, so there was only one way in and out into the cellar. The door reads, "Caution, children." Only these doors opened and closed at certain times. At 7 a.m., if there was no shelling, they opened the door for a quick stretch and have some fresh air. If there was shelling, people continued to sit in the cellar for over 24 hours. When the doors opened, could they go anywhere? Run? No, here stood a watchman, one here and one there. Behind a door were their infirmary and storage. Russians kept about 360 people underground. Therefore, the residents of Yahidne village assumed that they have been kept as a human shield so that the Ukrainian army would not strike this building, and the big amount of military that was put close to the civilians on purpose. Russians wanted to keep their tanks and military hardware safe, using people as a human shield. Tamara Andreevna, a survivor who was also kept in the basement, said that 360 people were in the cellar without fresh air, no ventilations, closed doors, no windows. People were losing consciousness. People died there. All people from the village were put there, all even disabled, ill, very old, and even the smallest babies. There wasn't enough air, so people drilled holes in walls to let at least some air in. The Russians opened the door in the morning. They let the people out for a bit to use the toilet, just a few minutes, and then they drove them all inside again. If you were not fast enough, they started to shoot into the air. People got scared and rushed inside, crushing each other. Sometimes they would let them out twice, sometimes not at all. Everything depended on the mood of the Russian leader. When people stayed inside all day long, they went to the toilet into the buckets in front of each other. Just sand as floor. People were glad to even the smallest piece of cardboard so they can sit on it. People lacked space. Many could not even lay down properly, so they had to sleep sitting. In this cellar were a few rooms. In 5 by 5 meter rooms were 35 people, including 3 disabled and 8 children. There were up to 70 children and a 2-month-old baby in the whole cellar. They would scream and shout, darkness all around. In the dark, impossible to change the nappies, babies could not be washed. At first, people were given 2 tablespoons of porridge a day. Parents didn't eat their portions and shared with their children. Children swallowed this little food quickly and asked for more. Tamara says it was terrifying and she is crying. A woman, Taisia, was lucky to stay at her place until 5 p.m. In an interview, she said that her husband is disabled and only walks on crutches. At first, Russians allowed them to stay in their apartment and not go into the cellar. But everything changed in the evening when the Russians came back with a gun, forced them to go where everyone is. And her husband spent the whole month laying down, and now he lost the ability to walk completely. She says that we lived in the basement and Russians were upstairs. A room where we stayed was 4 by 4 meters with 35 people. We used to sit during the day and put legs on each other during the night to keep warm and straighten up a bit. People sat everywhere, even in the corridor. Some rooms were overcrowded and they slept sitting and couldn't straighten out at all. One day, the Russian boss came and notified her room that there will be 5 more people coming. People's jaws dropped. They were shocked because 35 were in this room already. The boss pointed a machine gun and said, "My commander is badly wounded. The atmosphere is tense enough, and don't you even dare to open your mouths." The people, of course, obeyed. Taisia explains that they couldn't argue back because the ruthless boss could shoot them. People were powerless, with children and elderly in one room. One day, the Russians brought 10 more new people into a room. The new people only spent 10 minutes in that room because after, the Russians took them outside and shot all of them behind a fence. They took their phones away. Russians came in and said to hand over the phones. Otherwise, we'll shoot every 3rd person. So this is what the people did. They handed the phones away. What could they do? Nobody wanted to die. There were shootings. People died and died. A woman confirms that her neighbor was shot, a 30-year-old man, with no particular reason. He was outside when the Russians arrived. He was shot, and that's all. Overall, 11 people died in the cellar. Elderly who could not stand the atmosphere and the bad air. How did the Russians react to the fact that people are dying? Like it was usual, the corpses were collected in batches and kept in the boiler room, and then they were taken to the cemetery, buried in one go, in one grave. Russians forced the Ukrainian men to dig those graves. You can't even imagine what was happening in people's apartments and houses while the owners were forced to be underground. Russians did everything they wanted, no shame, ripped up people's clothes, ruined houses, and stole everything from jewelry to appliances. If Russians couldn't take something with them, they broke it. This was if Russians could not have it, then the Ukrainians couldn't have it too. As aforementioned, the Russian commanders stayed in the school, using civilians as a human shield. But soldiers lived in houses. They were too scared of a Ukrainian attack and organized to sleep in the basement of houses. They dragged mattresses, pillows, blankets, carpets, and comfort items into the basement. They destroyed cars, messed up houses, shit on the floor, and stole clothes. Even underwear and socks were stolen. Now the people are free. The village looks ruined and everything is blown up. No roofs. Houses stand bare and dirty. A lonely volunteer walks through the streets and gives away beef bones for people to at least cook a soup. A woman in an interview said that Ukrainian people in this village are hardworking. They produced a lot of food and everything to live a happy life. And in just one day, everything was taken away from them. Their houses were robbed. They became hungry and poor, and many of them lost their loved ones. Now, nightmares follow these people. Nightmares that the Russians will come back. It is hard to believe that such things are happening in 21st century. Horrible, scary things. In Ukraine, people are dying. Innocent people. This war is happening without particular reason. And just those people don't deserve the torture. Thank you for listening to this radio show, Marichka Talk. I work for IPL Radio in Perth, Western Australia. Please subscribe to this channel, Marichka Talk, and I hope to see you here next time. If you would like to listen to me more often, I have a podcast, Morning Radio. It's easy to find me on Instagram, just type Marichka Talk or I am Marichka. I have put my soul and heart into these topics. So please support me with a like, a comment. Thank you for listening.